This lesson provides an introduction to the Windows Deployment Services functionality. So Windows Deployment Services is the Microsoft-provided solution for deployment of Microsoft operating systems of really Windows Vista and Windows Server 2008 and above. Those operating systems leverage the Windows Imaging Format, or WIM, which has been standard since Windows Vista. Windows Deployment Services has a number of different components to it, but at a high level, the functionality provides a PXE boot environment that machines can boot over the network from. It has a Windows Desktop Services Client, WDS client, which then runs on those machines that are booted over the network, or even from a CD when a discovery image is used, which then queries the WDS server environment for the available images. An image is downloaded and installed on the client, configuration can be performed, then that machine has actually had the operating system installed locally to it. With Windows Deployment Services, you can actually take the WIM files directly from the media and leverage those inside Windows Deployment Services without any modification. However, it's also fully supported to create your own WIM-based files that you could have deployed the operating system, make some modifications and customizations, and then capture that image using tools such as ImageX. Windows Deployment Services also actually provides a capture image capability. Additionally, in Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7 Enterprise Ultimate Edition, a new feature was introduced called Boot to VHD. This allows a physical machine to actually boot from a VHD file, a virtual hard disk, which is commonly only used for virtual machines. This means WDS also can now deploy those VHDs to servers or even desktops, enabling those machines to boot from a VHD file. Note, this is not doing a virtual machine deployment. It is not deploying that VHD to a virtual machine environment, but rather would be just placing that VHD on the file system. One of the key components if you do want to create your own images is the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit, the ADK. This is a key capability that really gives you all of those tools to customize, create answer files for your Windows 8 and Windows 2012 deployment environment. So essentially at a very, very high level, WDS is giving you this PXE boot environment for network-based installations. There are some requirements. Now, brand new to Windows Server 2012, Windows Deployment Services no longer has to be a member of Active Directory, which was a previous requirement. The reason the requirement was there is Active Directory is used to actually pre-provision computer accounts and check if a computer account exists to enable an OS to be deployed to. Windows Server 2012 now enables a local store to be used for those purposes. However, integrating with Active Directory is still preferred. DNS services are still required, even in standalone mode and certainly in Active Directory mode. DHCP services are required to give the clients an IP address. Windows Deployment Services only provides this PXE boot image to enable an operating system to be deployed with. It does not give out IP addresses, and so it is necessary to have DHCP services deployed in your environment. An NTFS partition is required for the storage of those boot and operating system images that we're going to leverage through Windows Deployment Services. There is one special configuration to consider, and that's if you're installing Windows Deployment Services on the same server as your DHCP service. By default, Windows Deployment Services tries to listen on the same port as the DHCP service, port 67. So if you install Windows Deployment Services on the same server as a DHCP service, the WDS installation will automatically configure the option to not listen on port 67 and will also set an option on the DHCP server, which is tag 60, to set it to also be a PXE client. You're going to want to use Windows Deployment Services anytime you need any ability to deploy operating systems en masse or be able to automate that deployment over the network. One of the great features of Windows Deployment Services is it supports multicast. So multicast is a technology that typically if I install an operating system over the network, I'm sending all the packets of the operating system over the network to every single machine. So if I have a 10 gigabyte image and I'm deploying to 10 machines, I'm sending 100 gigabytes of data over the network, 10 gigabytes for each machine. With multicast, all of those 10 machines could effectively subscribe to the same packets that I send over the network. So now I only have to send 10 gigabytes over the network and all of those machines would receive those same packets, making a very, very fast deployment and saving me a lot of bandwidth.